Okay, so you might have noticed that the last tutorial ended rather abruptly, and that's because I started going through and recording a process for exporting out the blend shapes and specifically for separating them into left and right hand versions, and discovered down the pipeline that that process, the way I was going to go about it, wasn't going to work as well as I thought. So, I didn't get rid of the start of that video because it was still relevant, but I did stop it quite abruptly there after the asymmetrical detail. So I've gone through, I've found a better method, and I'm going to share that with you now. And so what you see here in the front of us is basically where we left off before. We had engaged with the asymmetrical detail before. I believe I've got that turned off here. Yep. And so as we move our way through our model, as we try to export out these blend shapes, we do need to come up with a method that's going to allow us to easily and accurately, or even precisely even, create left and right hand versions. And we need to think about how that's going to work. So for some of these blend shapes, it's not going to matter. You know, the eyes, for instance, they're not anywhere near the center line, so we can get away with making those left and right hand versions quite easily, but anything that traverses the center line, like the lips or the brows, is a more difficult situation to deal with. So in order to deal with this, I am going to go in and show you a couple methods that I do to kind of customize my workflow. Let's get started. What I'm going to do is make sure that I'm back at my base level, which I am, and I'm going to pop on down to subdivision level 1. And one thing that I don't recall if I pointed out here or not already, depending on when I recorded these tutorials, is that I have my subdivision levels available here in, of course, the tool menu, but I also put them down here in a custom shelf that I've created. So whenever I move around here, it's just easier for me to come down here into this little custom area and slide my little slider here. So what I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm going to export out a base mesh, and I'm going to show you why that's the case. So I'm just going to go and export out, and we're going to call this just base level 30. See, make sure I'm in the right project directory. So this currently says JSON head 24. So we're going to call it JSON head 30, and we'll just say, you know, something like base. In fact, actually, I believe that's one of the blend shapes that I'd created here. Yeah, level 30 base. I'm just going to export over that just to make sure that I'm exactly the same model. And I'm just going to go and bring that into Maya. Now, the version of Maya that I'm working with here is 2016, and the second release, I believe, is what it's called. It's yeah, I think it's like SR2 or something like that. The reason why that makes a difference is because, actually, I think I'm in just the first Maya here. I'm going to pause real quick. There we go. I opened up the correct version here. This is Maya 2016 extension 2 SP1. That's what they call it here. And I'm just going to make sure that fits my window a little bit better there. Now, the reason why why I point that out is just because one of the features I'm going to show you was created as part of this extension 2 for Maya 2016. So let's go ahead and import in our head. So we'll go to File, Import Options. I'll choose OBJ and make sure that single object is selected. So import that in. I'm just going to go to my directory here, copy and paste it. It's on my other screen. There we go. And we will say blend shapes and find our base. There we go. Hit F to frame up on it because it sits a little bit higher. And I don't like this default material, so I'm just going to assign the existing Lambert 1 material. Alright, so what I'm concerned with here has nothing to do with the shape so much as it does with the UV layout. So the way that I created this UV layout was to have as much texture area devoted to the face as possible because of doing very high resolution texture process. You know, ultimately, I don't generally advise having a seam down the center of your face, but because I was doing my texturing with Mari, it didn't really make much difference. And it does, however, in this case, make a bit of a difference in terms of how we are proceeding when we come into ZBrush to try to clean up these blend shapes. First off, you can see that I got a multi-tile texture layout here, and what I want to do is to create a version of my UV layout that is only a single a single tile. Now I could go in and create a multi UV set layout, but because I'm going to be exporting this out as an OBJ, the OBJ will only store one UV set to begin with, and so it's that would be unnecessary to do so. But what I am going to do is come in here and decide where I'm going to sew my UV edges back together. Now this is probably something that's only really pertinent to my project because I am dealing with this kind of layout, so some of you might just be able to ignore this part, but there might be some valuable information here. So I've just selected the edges that I'm working from, and I'm going to just get the line right down the middle of the face and nothing else, so I don't need anything that's on the inside of the lips. And make sure there's nothing else selected over here on these other patches, and that should be fine. So I'm just going to go to polygons, and we'll go to sew UV edges, and that creates this really funky layout where everything's just stretched like that. And now what I want to do is go to polygons, and we'll go to my unfold options, and I'm going to use the unfold 3D options. Iterations can probably just be set to 1 or 2 in this case, doesn't really matter. And let's just see what we get when we go with these options here. So let's hit apply. All right. So I've basically not clicked on pack, because if I click on pack when I do this, it's going to try to pack all that into a single UV tile, and I don't want to change the relative size between what the patches look like from what they were created at compared to these sizes here. I want to maintain as close as possible that degree of scaling. So now I have a single face basically, and if I were to bring this over and I just want to kind of put it over somewhere where we can more easily see what's going on. Okay, so here's what I want to point out. If you watch that center line that goes down the middle here, you'll see that it's not exactly straight, and that's just a holdover. It's not necessarily a perfectly symmetrical process here in Maya, at least not yet. So I want to symmetrize that a little bit better. So I'm just going to go back and I'll click on Shell again, and I'm going to come up to my options for Tool and Symmetrize UV Tool, and select an edge to define the topological symmetry seam. That basically means where is the symmetry. So it's just down this line here. And then I get this cool little brush. I'm going to hold down the B key to make it bigger. And as I click and drag with this brush, it starts to try to symmetrize. Now that looks like that was a bit too big. So let's just choose that again. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And in fact, if I look at this here, I think the reason why I'm getting this result is because I'm not actually sitting on any kind of middle symmetry line. So I'm just going to bring my whole thing over and sort of sit it right on that line of symmetry in the grid as well, or as close to it as possible. So let's just try that again and see if this works this time. So I'm actually quite new to this tool because it is a brand new tool. This is the one that I mentioned before that has been released with the updated version of 2016. So click on this edge and let's just see what we get. There we go. That's looking a little bit better. And so just holding down the left mouse key and pressing down, and let's see what we get. So when I do that now, you'll see is that we have a nice, clean, straight line down the center. Okay, so that's going to work for our purposes. Now I also want to go in and sort of pack these down. So I'm going to select all my shells and say, let's go ahead and pack these into one tile. So that should be, I believe, in layout. No, not layout, sorry. No, I always forget. Basically, it's not the. I am not a a user of Maya's UV tools too often. So let's just press layout. There we go. It is layout. Sorry, I got confused. So layout options. And what I want to do is just make sure that everything goes into a single tile, and I think that should be fine. So we'll press apply again. And what that does is it shrinks everything down. It's scaled proportionately for it to all fit into one tile. Okay, so that's the neck right there. And what I want to make sure of is that the center line that we have on these various objects is exactly the same. So you can see that my center line right now on my head is right down this vertical line here. I'm going to keep that as close as possible. Just pull that up and do the same thing for anything that sits down the middle. Right? So this is the interior of the mouth. It's also important to make sure that it's more or less symmetrical as well. So right now we can see that we don't have an exactly symmetrical result. It might be slightly rotated, but let's go ahead and for the sake of argument say, let's do that same process here with Symmetrize UV. We'll choose that middle line, and we're just gonna, there we go. Guess that makes it symmetrical now. Cool. And maybe I can just do the same thing here. I hit Y to repeat the previous command, and there we go. Snaps. Cool. All right. This UV layout here is only for the purposes of the blend shapes that we're about to try to mirror. It's not going to affect our texturing at all, so I don't need to worry too much about that. Now we get that's our eye sockets, and these are our ears. What I need to do, though, is make sure that everything that's on the left-hand side of the face stays on the left-hand side of the face, and vice versa. So it's kind of important that I come in here and have a look real quick. So if I go to face mode, right, that's clicking on that side corresponds to the back of the head there. And this, clicking on that there, you see actually is that eye socket there. So this is, in fact, the eye socket that goes on this side. And this ear goes over here. So let's make sure that we get that correct. So select face, I'm going to make a big selection here, and that's everything on that side of the face, which is correct. Everything on this side of the face is correct. Make sure that these guys line up. Cool. Interior of the mouth lines up. All right, so everything is now matching. That's what I want to make sure of. Cool. Now, this is going to work fine for our purposes so long as this center line and this center line and this center line here are all on the exact same vertical orientation. I'll show you why in just a second. So we're just going to move that over there. Cool. And I'm going to go ahead and select that, and we're just going to export this out, export selection. And I'm going to call this, let's go to my projects and go into this project, data, and we're going to call this level 30. But what this one is our gradient UV. So I'm going to be creating a gradient here real quick in Photoshop. I'm going to need to export out this UV layout as well. So let's go to Polygons, UV Snapshot, and I'll just keep it at my 4K map, doesn't really matter. And we'll come in, go back to our project again. So we'll go into my head and source images. Is it source images or textures that I had this in originally? It might have been textures. Textures, yes. And I'm going to overlay this one. So I'm going to get rid of what I created before and save that and say OK. Yes. All right. So I'm just going to now pop over to Photoshop, and we're going to go ahead and open up that file. So we'll go and find that. This is in projects, and there we go, and textures, and that was this TIFF file here. Okay, perfect. So basically, if I think about this, just looking at it in ZBrush, and I'll put on polyframe here so it's easier to see the frames. When I am creating these blend shapes, ultimately the left and the right hand versions are created so that when you activate both the left and the right hand version, they create the overall shape together. So mathematically, if we think about this, that means that on either side of the left hand version or the right hand version, right down the middle, the influence on the left hand side has to be 50% and the influence on the right hand side has to be 50%, because together they need to add up to be 100%. You don't want it to exceed 100% because otherwise you get something that creates a mound that sort of points up and goes beyond what the original shape was. And you don't want it to be less than 100% because then it creates a dip and it creates sort of this valley that doesn't complete the blend shape. And it creates this, what we're trying to do is create this taper effect so that if I curl my lip up, for instance, that what I'm going to get is a taper of just as if you were kind of like sneering your lip up a little bit, curling your lip up, that you would see that it would start out lower here and then get bigger on this side. It wouldn't just all of a sudden start in the middle. And this is one of the problems that I had in the previous versions when I was trying to create a solution for this, is that I was getting too much immediate change right in the middle that wasn't looking correct. So I'm trying to create this drop-off where I get 50% in the middle and everything else then sort of goes down to 0 here for the left-hand side, and this goes down to 0 here for the right-hand side. All right, so how do we create that? It's pretty simple, actually. What we're going to do is go in here, and I'm just going to create a new guide. And this is completely based on the fact that I should have this down the exact center here, based on the way that I tiled my layout. So I'm just going to say a vertical guide, 50%. It's not absolutely necessary that you do this guide, but because you could just rely solely on the layout of the UVs, but it's just nice to see, to make sure that, confirm that everything is lining up right down that center line. So the question is, how far do I want the gradient to go from, where does it begin to where does it end? And this is probably more to do with just doing a little bit of testing to see what, the results that you get if you like them. So what I'm going to do is go in and choose my gradient tool and go from black to white, and I'm going to decide that on the left hand side to the right hand side I'm going to go from the same point to its corresponding point on the opposite side. So let's just presume that we choose maybe something that's really easy to identify, maybe this point here, which is going to match up with this point here. It's just one of these little 5-sided vertices. All right, so I'm just going to click and drag, and I'm doing this on my new layer. Just go to the exact same point on that side, and now I get this gradient, which means that since I went from this one point on this side to the exact opposite point on this side, it goes from 100% white here to 0% white here, or 100% black. And in this middle point here, it should be exactly 50%. And if I just want to confirm this, click right there. The value I get is 128, which is on a 256, basically 8-bit color, which is 256 colors. 128 is half of 256, and therefore that's equivalent to 50%. My black value here is currently at 51%. So depending on the pixel that I choose, you can see that one there was 50%. We are exactly where we want to be. And also because the way that I set this up, just zoom out here a little bit, because everything on this side of this vertical line corresponds to one side of the face and everything on this side corresponds to the other side of the face, this is working out pretty well. Now, it is conceivable that where I've put this gradient might not be the absolute best position for some of the eye shapes. All right, and so I might want to consider that, just sort of thinking out loud here. So if I go in here and say, I'm just going to pull this opacity down a bit, I might want to maybe not have it go quite as far. So let's just, I'll delete that layer and create another gradient instead that is going to go from maybe not so far over there, but we'll choose maybe this point here, which should correspond with, actually, so that's a low dip there. So 1, 2, go to that side. So 1, 2, there we go. Right there. Okay. And that, I think, is going to be a little bit better. Just confirming again with those eyes. So I'm just trying to think ahead. And that's probably better. Okay. I could always soften this in ZBrush if I need to as well. So I'm just going to save this out. And I'm going to save this out as this TIFF file is fine. It should be fine. Say gradient layout. Yes. And I don't need any compression. And save. Alright, cool. So let's take this into ZBrush now and see what we get. Alright, so when we are working now with this, we have to update the UV layout of our current model. We have to take in the UVs that we created in Maya. Otherwise, this is not going to work for us. So I'm at subdivision level 1, and I'm going to come in and click on Import. And I'm going to go to find my gradient UVs. Now that should not change anything to do with the base, with the actual shape of it. It just changes the UVs that sit underneath. Alright, cool. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go in and bring this back up to subdivision level 7. And this is just going to calculate in the background, obviously. And I'm going to go to my layers, and let's just go to a layer where we can really see whether or not this is working for us. So something where it goes all the way across the face, down the middle. So maybe something like the upper lip up. I'm going to turn that on with recording on. Cool. Very charming shape there. And now I need to bring in that gradient as my alpha. So I'm going to go import, and we'll go and find that. So that's down to my textures, and I'll do this one right here, gradient layout. And this is interesting. Doesn't look like it's saved out very nicely. So just really quickly here, I'm just going to save this as a PSD. I find that sometimes TIFFs are not as reliable. So it's a PSD, and it's going to call it blend shape gradient, which is the previous file that I had there. There we go. Let's try that one instead. Import, blend shape gradient. That looks nicer. Cool. And what I'm going to do now, normally I come down into my masking palette and click on mask by alpha, because that's going to take the file that we brought into the alpha channel and use it as a mask. I have also put this button down here because I use it quite a bit as well. Click on that. Now we can see that we get this nice fall off, which is exactly what we want. So this is just giving an idea that this is in fact working. So I do need to do a step before I start here though, which I did forget to do. So let's just step back for a moment. I'm going to turn off recording here on the upper lip up, because what we're going to do is create what's called a morph target. And the morph target is going to be what we effectively paint back to, a shape that we paint back to. So if I have my blend shape active and I paint back to my morph target, if my morph target is the base shape, then I'm basically taking all the influence of that layer and painting it back to, in a specified location, what the base shape looked like. Yeah, maybe that makes more sense if you see it, if you haven't done this before. So we're going to go to geometry. I'm going to bring this back down to level 3. I need to create my morph target at my target level of subdivision, which I'm exporting everything out at level 3. So in my tool menu, I come down and I will find an option for morph target. And the only option I have is store empty, which means to store the morph target. And I just click on that. Right, so it's basically loaded in this shape as the morph target. Now I'm going to pop back up to level 7 so that I can enable that layer that we were just on before, the upper lip up. So I'll turn on recording there. And we're going to pop back down to level 3. Now, let's go ahead and mask by alpha again. So normally what I would do, what you could do, is go to your brush menu and click on what's known as the morph brush and start painting it back. And you can see that as I paint this back here, it's going back to the original value of my of that base shape, right? So however, I want this to be nice and even and sort of distributed everywhere following the gradient. So I'm just going to undo all of that painting that I just did and let ZBrush catch up with me here. I'm just going to pause while I do this. Okay, there we go. Instead of using the brush, what I can do is I can go into the morph target options and just do this universally based on the mask. So what this mask does is anywhere we see the mask, that's not going to affect, or I should say the morph target is not going to affect that part. So if I go to my morph section here, I'm going to type in 100. And this is what we get. See how we get this nice, quite even fall off based on our gradient. That's really nice. And this point right here in the middle should be exactly 50% of the transformation, hopefully. All right, so what we're going to do is go in here and say export. Let's export this shape. I'll come into my, hopefully this will work here. I'll come into my data folder, blend shapes, and we're going to call this JSON head 30 level 01. This is actually JSON head 30. And this is upper lip up, and the side on the head here is the left-hand side. Upper lip up, left. There we go. Great. So I just undo now, and I'm going to control-click in the negative space here to invert the mask, and I'm going to run that morph target again, or the morph function again, and now it does it for the opposite side. So export, upper lip up, right. There we go. Cool. So just to confirm, we're going to take these shapes into Maya now and make sure that they perform the way that we expect them to. Now this is the exact same geometry that we have just been working from, except for this is at level 1. So what I need to do is come in here and get a level 3 version. So I'm just going to pop back into ZBrush, and we're going to go back into my geometry here, bring that up to subdivision level 1, turn off this layer, turn off the record on that layer. Eventually. I notice that this can take a little while. It is kind of a memory intensive process. I also need to turn off the visibility of that and bring this back down to level 3. And we will export out a base. Now I'm just going to copy over the base here just to make sure that's exactly the same. Yes. Okay. So in Maya, let's get rid of that guy. Go into import and bring in our base. And it's going to go ahead and choose modify center pivot, which I have right here in my custom shelf. I'm just moving that over a little bit so that when I bring in these other two, it doesn't sit right on top of them. Okay, it's going to bring these guys over a little bit. Center pivot on both of them. Doesn't really matter to me what order they're in. And I'm going to change this one to have the Lambert 1 material. Okay, let's just go into a front view, turn off my grid, and I'm going to set these both up as blend shapes on here. So we'll go to the rigging menu set, and we'll go to, basically if you haven't done this before, I just select all of the geometries that are going to be a blend shape, and then finally I select the target mesh. I'm just holding down Shift as I do that. Go to the rigging menu set, deform, blend shape, and I'm not going to worry about the options for now. We can talk about those later, and just turn on the blend shape. So if I click on any one of these, I can access that same blend shape node because they're all connected. And I'm going to just click on one that's not the target mesh that I'm working from, just so it's easier to see the result. So I can see I have the left and the right version here. So if I click on that, hold down the middle mouse button and drag in the viewport, I get that happening there. This one, I get the other side. And if I do them both at the same time, aha, it worked. Perfect. And this is because we are trying to make sure that we get exactly 50% influence right down that center line with a nice even fall off. Right? So looks like we were successful in making this work. Hopefully that'll work for the remainder of our blend shapes. And if there's anything to worry about, well, I guess we're going to encounter it. So this is just a bit of a start, and this right here was just a test. I'm not going to save this right here, but as I move back into ZBrush here, I am going to continue on in the next video creating some of the remaining blend shapes, just to show you the process that I go through to kind of get you into a groove, and then we'll move on from there. So I'll see you in the next tutorial.